Today we're going to talk about gradient mesh, and I think I'll just draw a basic fish for an example. So this is just going to be my main body shape that I'll create for this. And if I want to put a gradient in something, it's great. We can use the gradient tool. We can, pick a swatch color. We can apply it. That gradient tool can change, the direction that it's in. We can pick a different color, right? We can change it to a color in our color palette. We could pick a swatch if we wanted to. But no matter what, it's still linear or it's radial. And we don't have a lot of control over nonlinear and non-radial transitions from color to color. So a great way to do this is using gradient mesh. So I'm going to set this back to just white and black. And there's a couple different ways to use gradient mesh. I'll show you both ways. I'll start by creating a shape, and it doesn't have to be an oval. It could be any type of a shape that you create. And I can go to Object, and I can say Create Gradient Mesh. So when I create this gradient mesh, it's going to ask me, well, how many rows and columns do you want? So you can see columns, right, 5, and rows 5. The appearance right now is flat. And so let's just leave the defaults in here, and I'm just going to click OK. It fills it with white, but if I, let's say, pick green, you can just see it's just whatever color I pick, it's all one flat color. So I'm going to Command Z to get out of that. Maybe I'll just put it back to green so it's easier to see before we do this. So Object, Create Gradient Mesh. This time I'm going to do a to the center. And so when I do this, it actually creates a highlight to the center of the object. And if I go to the edge, then it creates a highlight to the edge of this object. So how much of a highlight do I want is determined right here. So if I don't want 100% white, I could do a 50% tint, and then it would tint it back. So totally up to you with what you want to do. Many times I just start with flat because I'm going to put in my own values anyway. Okay, so I'm starting out with 5 rows and 5 columns. If I decide that I need more or I need fewer of these at some point, that's what the gradient mesh tool is used for. So if I come over here on my toolbar to the gradient mesh tool, and I come over here onto my object, you'll notice that I get a plus sign. And so if I would click right here where my cursor is, it's going to create a horizontal and a vertical mesh point for that shape. So that's how I add them. If I want to subtract them, I hold down the Option key, and that plus turns to a minus. And I can click an anchor point to delete a horizontal and a vertical line where they intersect. Or if, say, I just click a line, just this is a horizontal line, it will just get rid of that line. And it could be horizontal or it could be vertical. I'm going to Command Z just to put that one back. So try to have as few mesh areas as possible to do what you want to do. More is not always better. It complicates it. And if you don't need the transitions for the colors, then I suggest not having them on there. We're going to do just kind of a basic idea here. So a few different ways to change colors. One is to use my direct selection tool. So notice right now that all my anchor points are highlighted blue, which means they're all selected. So if I would click on a color, everything is going to change to that color. But if I use my direct selection tool and I click on just one anchor point, it should make this one solid and the rest of them hollow. Maybe I need to click off, click back on. And now when I click on a color, it changes this anchor point. Okay. If I want to, that's just selecting and picking a color. I can also grab a color, drag and drop it inside of a cell, and it will completely fill that cell, and then it blends halfway into the surrounding cells. If I take a color and I drag and drop it on an anchor point, then it puts that solid color at that anchor point and then blends into those other shades or the other cells. Okay, so this is really the basics of gradient mesh. Now, I can move these anchor points and I can have them do whatever I want with my direct selection tool. If I want to do an entire row of color, let's say I'm going to have I'm going to do a fish, so I want this to be a little bit more of the white, but I want it to have a little bit of yellow in it. We'll just kind of do yellow, make it a little bit easier to see. This works great to use my selection tool because everything is pretty linear. I'll show you another way to do this in a little bit. I want the top of this to be more of a green color, so I'll just pick a green color here. And actually, I want this one to be a little bit darker, so I'm just going to add a little bit of black to that just to kind of darken the top of it. And then I can kind of work on transitioning down. So this is maybe too white for my center area here. So I'm going to select this and I'm going to make that just a little bit of a lighter green. So I get a little bit of a lighter transition kind of going, you know, from darker down to lighter, and maybe just a touch of a lighter. We'll go a little bit lighter there. And work my way down. Now, I kind of like that color for there, but this one I want to take down just a little bit more toward white. So you might be saying, well, this looks just like a linear gradient, right? You can just do this like a straight linear gradient and I can achieve that same look. I'm just trying to build a foundation for this fish at this point, because what I want to do now is I want to add in some stripes that go this way, and I'm going to want them to have a little bit more of a shift. So let's say I just kind of use these to paint that a little bit. Now again, I could still kind of grab this to make a stripe, but another way to select this is with your selection tool. And so this allows you, like the lasso tool will allow you to kind of go in and do like an irregular. You just have to, wherever you start, you have to finish. And so since I have that line selected, I could put in, let's say like more of a yellow stripe. But I don't like how wide that stripe is. Okay, I don't want it to blend out quite that hard or that much. I want it to have a little bit of a harder kind of a stripe going down this fish. So I'm going to Command Z for that one. So if I want a little bit of a harder line, I'm actually going to add a line into here. So you can see this one has moved already. So when I click here to add a line, it's going to add, there's my vertical and my horizontal. I don't want the horizontal line necessarily, so I'm going to delete that one. And I'm going to add another one over here. Option click the horizontal line to get rid of it. So I'm creating 2 additional vertical lines basically to control how far out my stripe is going to be. So I can use my lasso selection tool to go in here and select, but actually I don't want it to go all the way to the edge. I actually just kind of want to get these right in here. Oh. I think I'll just start with this. And again, because I'm using the lasso tool, I have to come back around to where I started here. And I want this to be a little more of a yellow color, but maybe not quite that bright. So bring it down a little bit more. Okay. So now you can see the difference between this stripe that I just added because I added these other mesh lines in here. Now when I add that yellow into basically those 3 anchor points, the anchor points are at 100% of that yellow that I put in there, and then it blends halfway into the surrounding mesh points, and that's how I get a little bit of a harsher stripe that goes through here without it being a complete solid line, and it follows the shape of this. So if I go back in and click on this, again, I could select these 3 anchor points if I don't like where they are, and I can adjust it even more, and it follows with it. So wherever I decide to put this up, down, right, look at how those colors all go with that mesh. So even after you've colored it, you can still make adjustments to that mesh. So if I go back to the mesh tool again, I'll add a couple over here. So just click, and then I'm going to option click the additional horizontals because I don't need those additional horizontal lines. I really just want these. And again, I could just shift click these as well. Then grab that color, adjust it to where I want it to be. Do the same thing here. And now I'm adding some stripes into that mesh. Of course, adding an eye, right? Have to have a fish's eye in here, so go ahead and add that into there. You literally could even do a mesh of this eye. So if I make this black, so that'll be that, I could actually create even a mesh of this, but I think I will just do this a radial. Make it a radial here as well. And I'm going to reverse the gradient. Right, so that kind of gives it fish a little bit more of a blue eye, but still has some kind of tonal value to it. And now maybe I want to give this fish a tail fin, right? And by the way, I could still kind of go in here, like this is too even for this fish, so I would kind of go in here and I could adjust, maybe even just use my, remember your arrow keys, you could adjust point, I'll try like 0, 1. Whoa. 0.01. So this can kind of create a little bit more of a realistic looking shape. So it's not a perfectly symmetrical oval shape. But let's go ahead and create the tail fin here. So I'm going to use the pen tool and create my fin, and I'll show you why this can be problematic. I'm going to close that shape off. So just use the pen tool, just sketched out a really quick fin. And another way to create a gradient mesh, instead of going under Object, Create Gradient Mesh, I can just go straight to the Mesh tool and I can click on my fin and it will add my anchor points where I want them to go, which works actually pretty well with this shape. If you go to Object, Create Gradient Mesh, well, I made this shape too well apparently. Many times when you use the pen tool to create a gradient mesh, you get some really wonky looking anchor points and things kind of will wig out on you. And what I mean by wigging out is the like these types of things will start to happen where it will pull anchor points outside of your actual shape, and it kind of really messes with your object and when you're trying to create that mesh. So if that happens to you when you're creating that that shape, the best way to get around that is actually to start with a rectangle and create your mesh. So however many that you want to put in here. And then, and maybe I want one kind of like right here to just to transition a little bit there, but I don't want that one there. And I might want another one there, but I don't want that. Okay, and then go in and adjust the shape. So sometimes this is what I have to do to kind of create what I want when I go to create mesh and it's just really doing strange things. Then just go back to a standard shape, make the mesh, and then adjust the shape accordingly. I'm going to lock this shape, so Command 2 to lock that, and then I can just grab this. I want it to be a little bit, I want it to overlap into my shape, but I don't want it to overlap too much into my shape. And I am, by the way, purposely making this line pretty close to where the edge of that fish shape is, because I want to blend the colors into here to give it a more realistic look with my, my tail fin. So one kind of nice thing about this is I could select this anchor point and then I can use my eyedropper tool to sample the color from there. I can also do this by just clicking the cell and then I for eyedropper, and then I pick that color that's close to it. So A for direct selection tool to click inside the cell, I to grab the eyedropper, grab that color value, right? So just switching forth, back and forth between A, select, I, sample, A, select, I, sample. And so this is a great way to, well, let me go back here, A, select, and then I, sample. See how that one's kind of pushing a little bit too far in here. So I want to make sure that I'm grabbing that. I'm going to sample a color that's a little bit closer to here. And might need to put another one in here. I'm going to grab this one and sample that color. So it's kind of transitioning that in a little bit better. So you can hopefully get that to match a little bit more. And of course, even after we have those colors in there, we can adjust the shape. Still not close enough, so I'm actually going to grab that end anchor point and literally just click the color that is right next to this. So I get a really nice color transition. Okay, so I need a little bit of work right here on that one. So I'll try that one again. Still have a little bit of a harsh edge on here. Okay, so look at how I can see the shape here, but now when I'm off of this, they're pretty much blending in. I have a little bit of, yeah, this one could use a little bit more work, but the other thing is maybe just pull it a little bit closer to that edge. So then when I'm grabbing this color and then I'm sampling from there, there's less of a, yep, now it just kind of blends right into that color. And then I can go back in here and obviously control what I want to do from here. So if I want to grab these color values and sample from here, right, then I'm pulling that in. And if I grab this one, and I'm just going to leave those outer ones a bit darker. Maybe I would really want to work that in a little bit more too. But that gives you the basic idea. So look at this, the shape of the tail has, you know, the gradient actually goes to the shape. It's not stuck to just a linear or just a radial gradient. So go on and play around with gradient mesh and have fun. And remember, more cells is not necessarily better, because then you sometimes get too many squares and it can actually look pixelized because you have too many mesh points.